The season is all but over for the Carolina Panthers. We have 60 minutes of football that remain until we can sit back and decompress and figure out what the heck just happened on the defensive side of the ball. And there's a lot to unpack as we head into the final week of the NFL season. We have a meaningless game coming up against the Atlanta Falcons. And to be honest, I would not be surprised if a lot of guys get shut down. Specifically Bryce Young, and it's not because Bryce Young has played poorly. He was the probably lone bright spot that the Carolina Panthers had this past week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Xavier Legette, is he going to be shut down? And folks, I put together a podcast recording, the live episode, and I want to apologize for the audio quality. I use StreamYard. StreamYard is very hit or miss when it comes to recording and me doing the live show. So I know it was a little bit choppy, and so if you did bear with me through that, I appreciate it. But for folks that may be tuned out because of the choppiness, I understand. But we could still talk about some of the things that I discussed because they're still relevant. Xavier Legette, man. I am and have been one of the biggest supporters, one of the biggest fans of Xavier. I wanted the Panthers to draft him over a Ladd McConkey, over a Keon Coleman, over an A.D. Mitchell. All the guys that were in that range for the Carolina Panthers, and we said, yeah, this is our guy, and let's go get Xavier Legette. I was in that boat, and I don't want to say it was a disappointing season, but it certainly wasn't a season that has lived up to some of the other seasons of rookies that are in this class. And a lot of fans are probably wondering, did we have another miss? Do we have another Jonathan Mingo on our hands? And for me, I don't think so. But I do think there is a lot of work that Xavier Legette is going to have to go through. We know about the drops, the mis-execution on some of those plays, and it continues to compound week after week. We know he's battling an injury, multiple injuries. He's probably going to have surgery after the season, if we're being honest. He's got to work on his diet, his health. He's acknowledged that himself in some of the locker room scrums that we've listened to. But I'm not here to write him off just yet. I do think he's going to come around. But as I stated in another video I just made around free agency and the offseason and the Carolina Panthers and who or what they should focus on, we have to be honest with ourselves. Wide receiver and getting a true number one wide receiver has to be a top priority. Defense and everything that's on the defense, that's its own thing. But figuring out a way, whether it's through trade, free agency, the draft, we got to find somebody for Bryce Young. I would love for it to be in the draft, but considering how many needs we have on defense, it feels like a situation where we're probably going to have to land someone through free agency or potentially through a trade. That's just where things sit. There's too many needs on the defensive side of the ball. I don't see the Panthers wanting to waste another draft pick early on to pick up another wide receiver. I think the Panthers did, Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis did a fantastic job this offseason improving the offensive line, getting Bryce some weapons. Now, we can admit that Deontay Johnson fumbling is in not working out. Hey, it didn't work out, but no doubt they tried. And for us, I think the Panthers have to go swing for the fence this time. Deontay Johnson was a really good acquisition. For whatever reason, didn't work out here. Didn't work out in Baltimore. Hasn't worked out in Pittsburgh. He's now in Houston. But I think the Panthers need to land someone that isn't a 7th-round pick. Fantastic trade at the time when we gave up what we got to execute that. Absolutely worth everything that we gave up with Pittsburgh and Jackson and everything that went with that. But for me, man, it's going to be tough. And there's just a lot that the Panthers are going to have to fix. And I don't know how we get there, but we've seen bright spots. We've also seen a lot of lows. And when the Panthers are as low as they can get, well, we see what we saw on this past Sunday against Baltimore. But so that was the question, is Xavier Legette going to get shut down? I think we also throw in this bucket with J.C. Horn and Josie Jewell missing this past game. What point, in what sense does it make us to want to put them back out there? Why would Dave Canales or Dan Morgan or anyone want to put these two guys back out there? They've had fantastic years. Let's let them end the season healthy. Let's not risk a significant injury. So I think those guys are going to be shut down. And so back to Bryce Young. If Bryce Young were to sit this week, the question is, are we going to get a mix of Andy Dalton, or is this going to be the Plummer game? And I'm sure the Atlanta Falcons would love to not see Bryce Young out there, because to be honest, Bryce Young has played much better than he has of late. He's helped us go into this offseason with a plan to fix the defense and to not have to worry about the quarterback position. That's not saying Panthers aren't going to look at someone in free agency, a veteran backup, whoever that is. But at least where we are today, we can feel comfortable. I think the bigger question, though, in the entire offseason, really the day after Black Monday, whatever it's called, where everyone gets fired, is the state of the defensive staff. And I say staff because there is a possibility that Evero gets retained. I have to feel like it is not likely. This is not a source. This is not anything I've read. This is just reading the table. The NFL is a business, which we've acknowledged and I've acknowledged multiple times. Evero, for whatever reason, last year and this year, it just hasn't worked. You can point to last season being top 5 in yards allowed. That's great. But to be honest, I mean, teams, as we notated, were getting up big on the Panthers last year and then just running the ball. That was really what we saw. And unfortunately, this year, we see teams, they don't have to get up big to run the ball. They just run the ball. And we are now approaching, it's already the worst rushing defense in Panthers history in terms of yards allowed. Worst. And we still have one game to go as far as most yards allowed. We have one game to go, and the Panthers are creeping in territory. They already are, I think, top 10-ish, maybe on the fringe. I posted it yesterday. There's a really good chance they end up in top 5 in yards allowed in NFL history, in rushing yards allowed. That's how bad this rushing defense is. We continue to see guys be open. We continue to see misuse of players. Think about Frankie Louvu leaving. Think about Jeremy Chin, who is thriving in Washington. It's hard to know if it's the 3-4. It's hard to know if it's scheme. I don't know. But the Panthers just aren't getting it done on the defensive side of the ball. If for whatever reason they can retain Evero, maybe I would think they would have to look at changes elsewhere. That's just my opinion. I think they've got to shake things up because, to be honest, man, it's a disappointment. And I'm not expecting a lot. I don't think anybody was. We knew who left. You lose Yetur Gross-Matos. You lose Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu. Get rid of Von Bell. And I'm not saying all these guys are A++, but you get rid of some key pieces, and this is what you're left with. And then Shaq gets hurt. Derek Brown gets hurt. You're stuck with a bunch of guys. But I don't like to give Evero an easy out because the players that are here and that were assembled, a majority of these guys were players that had played in the system before under Evero, whether that was with the Rams or in Denver. They had experience. And I got to say, A'Shawn Robinson, Josie Jewell, two of the best. And for whatever reason, this defense and defensive scheme seemed to play well for defensive linemen, as A'Shawn Robinson's like one of the top tacklers for a defensive lineman, similar to what Derek Brown had last year as far as tackles that they made on the season. But for whatever reason, it's just not working. And, I mean, we can continue to make excuses. I even heard him on the broadcast, like the Panthers have signed the most players over the course of the season. That's evident. We've seen it since the waiver wire. Way back during training camp, the Panthers have been active, adding, picking guys up, bringing guys off the practice squad. And I'll also say, I understand it because when you are pulling guys in off of the practice squad elsewhere, there's a reason those guys are on the practice squad. And when that's the hand you're dealt and those are the guys you're playing with, you're probably not going to have a very good defense. So I have to look at it both ways. So if we get into this thing, I'm kind of split 60-40, maybe even 75-25 that I think Evero is out the building and there's just a full change. You also have to think about Dave Canales. Like Dave Canales, I mean, I know he's part of the decision in wanting to keep Evero here, but at the same time, Evero was interviewing for head coaching jobs with Atlanta, of course here with Carolina, with Seattle. Didn't work out. Panthers shut him down from being able to interview for coordinator positions elsewhere. I could see a situation where maybe he's not even fired technically, like out of the gate, but they let him interview elsewhere to see if he gets something. And so it's kind of this nicer departure for him. If he does stay, I think you got to figure out change. And I don't know the answers. Like, this wasn't a bad defense in Denver when he came over here, and we were excited about having him here. And I go back and look at last year, and it was like, oh, he's definitely going to be a head coach at some point. Still think that's a possibility, but I don't know if the track and the race that he is ran here in Carolina is going to really pay dividends. Yesterday was atrocious, man. It was a beatdown by Tampa Bay. Another game with over 200 yards rushing. Baker Mayfield torched us 5 touchdowns. The other thing that's out there right now, and I get it, but the narrative around Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield centered here in Carolina, and I get the story, and both players are playing well. One is competing for the NFC #1 seed. Other likely going to win the NFC South. Both guys have done fantastic. They both rebounded, but you have to remember these guys went elsewhere. Baker went to the Rams, although we shipped him off mid-season, then went to Tampa, found his footing with Dave Canales and Todd Bowles. Sam Darnold went to San Francisco, found his footing, bounced back, of course, landed in Minnesota. And to be honest, Sam Darnold likely isn't even in the position he's in if McCarthy does not get hurt. Like, that's just the nature of this whole thing. And so now the Minnesota Vikings are stuck with the situation of, like, do we go and pay Sam Darnold the $90 million, 2 years, $90 million contract that he's probably can command? Or do we let him walk and stick with J.J. McCarthy and just say, well, we can work around him and make this more of a system-style offense, i.e. Brock Purdy? I don't know. I know that's like way off on a tangent. The other thing is we talk about a lot about defense. The other group that just has not performed well, in my opinion, special teams unit. And we saw the miss from Eddie Pinheiro. That continues to be a thing. Eddie Pinheiro, I love Eddie Pinheiro. He's a great person. I mean, and I'm being serious. Like, he has signed so many autographs for us. One of the nicest people. Follows me on here online, and I appreciate it. I do. I appreciate the players, the family members, the folks that want to lend an ear to what I have to say, because it does mean something to know that people trust and believe in what I have to say and know that I'm not too crazy in some of my thoughts, but I'm also going to be honest, and it's not been great. Thought for sure we'd be able to retain him, but now it feels like he will likely be gone. Johnny Hecker potentially gone as well. I don't think we draft, maybe undrafted free agent. We already saw Mevis being brought in last year. I think there absolutely will be a change, but that's personnel change for special teams. I also think a coaching change with the special teams unit is going to come. Just my thought. Maybe it won't. Tracy Smith and Dave Canales are pretty close, or likely close from their time together in Seattle. I don't know that I'm buying it, though, because special teams has been poor. Block punts, poor coverage, fouls, not having enough men lined up. And there's so many issues. And so I don't know. I will tell you the same way that we give some slack or leeway to Ejiro Evero on the defensive side of the ball, you have to do the same thing for Tracy with the special teams, because you have to remember the guys that are playing special teams outside of linemen on field goal block or punt return, field goal team. Outside of the linemen, you're likely playing with a lot of guys who are fringe roster players. And when you have so many injuries, you're now just rotating in guys, trying to fill gaps with practice squad players that likely, as we can see, aren't even really good enough to play in the NFL. It's just where the Panthers are. Overall, I mean, it was another bumpy week as we go back and look at the Tampa Bay game. I don't think anyone expected much with Chuba Hubbard being out. I mean, you look at Chuba Hubbard out, Taylor Moton out, and everyone else who's out on the defensive side of the ball. It just felt like a day that's like, probably not going to do a lot. But I will tell you, the offense was fighting. The offense did all they could in the first half. I know they had some trouble with some 3-and-outs early, but I felt like the offense, went punch for punch initially. Got up 7-7, right there in it. Of course, we just couldn't stop Tampa Bay. Defense did all they could up to a certain extent. Had the late touchdown. Fantastic ball. I got to tell you, the Bryce Young-Adam Thielen connection is one of the best in the NFL. It really is. I don't think we could have imagined it. I kind of laughed that people wanted Adam Thielen out. I hope Adam Thielen has like 2 more years in him. I know we've got him under contract next year. I hope whatever he's got going on right now that he can keep it up, because he has been fantastic to watch. And even at his age, maybe there's something there too that he can just teach some of these younger guys to help with Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker. Although I feel it's odd feeling better about where Jalen Coker is versus where Xavier Legette is right now. But that's just my initial analysis and thought. And the last thing I'll say, speaking of FBS college football, it felt like yesterday, and I don't know if this cut out when I was recording, but it felt like our offense was an FBS program and our defense was an FCS program. For those who don't know, that's like Power Conference, Group of 5 versus an Elon or Subdivision Western Carolina local team, Citadel, one of those, Wofford. It felt like that's what we were going up, like Clemson versus Wofford when it comes to the Bucks offense and our defense. It was bad. So it's not the greatest finish to go out, and it's hard to imagine the Panthers get it done this week, but I'll just be glad that it's over, and then we can fully focus our time on the NFL draft. But anyways, folks, that's going to do it for today's episode. This is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a